Someone you love gets cancer. A child is born into poverty. A natural disaster wipes out thousands of innocent people. And somewhere in the middle of all that, pain, someone asks the question, that has haunted humanity for thousands of years. If God is real, if God is good, if God is all-powerful, why does he allow this? Why does he just watch? This is the question that has driven more people away from faith than any argument, any science, any philosophy. And today, we're going to face it head-on. No cheap answers, no empty comfort, just the truth. Welcome back to the God Question. I'm glad you're here. If this is your first time, this channel exists for one reason: to ask the hardest questions about God, faith, and existence and actually try to answer them. Last week we asked who God is. Today we ask why he seems so silent when we need him most. Let's go. Here's why this question matters so much. It's not just philosophical, it's personal. Almost everyone who has walked away from faith didn't leave because of a logical argument. They left because something happened. A loss, a tragedy, a moment where they cried out to God and heard nothing back. The silence hurt more than the pain itself. And that's the real question underneath the question. It's not just, why does suffering exist? It's, does God even care? Is he even there? Because if he is there and he's doing nothing, what kind of God is that? That's what we need to answer today. Let's start where we always start, with the ancient world. Because this question is not new. Humans have been asking it since the beginning. And some of the greatest minds in history tried to answer it. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus. Seneca had a philosophy about suffering that was actually remarkable. Epictetus was born a slave. He knew suffering firsthand, not as a concept, as a daily reality. And yet he wrote, "Some things are in our control, and others are not." The Stoics believed that suffering was not the enemy. That pain was neutral. It was your response to pain that defined you. Marcus Aurelius lost children. He fought wars. He watched his empire struggle. And every morning he wrote in his journal, not complaining, but training his mind to accept what he could not control. The Stoic answer to suffering is powerful. Accept what you cannot change. Focus on what you can. Build strength through adversity. And honestly, that's not wrong. There's real wisdom there. But here's the problem with the Stoic answer. It's cold. It's alone. It tells you to endure, but it doesn't tell you why. It gives you a method, but not a meaning. It makes you stronger, but it doesn't hold you when you're broken. And when you're lying on the floor at 3 a.m. and the grief is crushing you, you don't need a method. You need a reason. You need to know someone is there. So what does the Bible actually say about suffering? Because most people assume the Bible just says, trust God. It'll be fine. He has a plan. And if that's all it said, I'd understand why people walk away. But the Bible is actually far more honest about suffering than most people realize. Start with Job. Job is one of the oldest books in the Bible, and it's basically the story of a man who loses everything. His children, his wealth, his health, everything gone. And Job doesn't just quietly accept it. He argues with God. He demands answers. He says, I have done nothing wrong. Why is this happening to me? And God doesn't punish him for asking. God doesn't strike him down for his honesty. In fact, at the end of the book, God says Job spoke rightly. The man who screamed at heaven spoke rightly. That's remarkable. The Bible makes room for your anger. It makes room for your questions. It doesn't demand that you pretend everything is fine. Then there's the Psalms. David, the king of Israel, a man after God's own heart, wrote things like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you? Why are you so far from saving me? That's not the language of someone with easy faith. That's the language of someone in real pain, crying out into what feels like an empty sky. And the fact that those words are in the Bible, the fact that God preserved them, tells us something important. God is not afraid of your honesty. He's not waiting for you to be okay before he listens. He meets you in the mess. But here's where the Christian answer to suffering goes further than anything else in history. Here's what makes it unique. Every other religion and philosophy looks at suffering from the outside. They offer advice on how to deal with it, how to endure it, how to accept it. But Christianity says something completely different. It says, God didn't just watch suffering from a distance. He entered it. He became human. He was born in a dirty stable to a poor family in an occupied country. He lost people he loved. When Lazarus died, Jesus wept. Not because he didn't know what was coming, but because grief is real and he felt it. He was betrayed by his closest friend. He was abandoned by his disciples. He was tortured, and on the cross he cried out the same words as David. My God, why have you forsaken me?" The Son of God felt abandoned by God. Let that sink in. Whatever you are going through, Jesus has been there. Not as an observer, as a participant. The Christian God is not a distant king watching from a throne. He is a God who got his hands dirty, who bled, who suffered, who died. That changes everything. So now let's look at the 3 real answers the Bible gives to why suffering exists. Because there isn't just one answer, there are layers. The first is this: suffering builds what comfort never can. The Stoics were onto something here. James chapter 1 says, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Not because pain is good, but because who you become through pain is something that could never happen any other way. The people you most admire in life, the ones with real depth, real wisdom, real compassion, almost all of them have been through something hard. Suffering is not the opposite of growth. Sometimes it is the path to it. The second answer is this: we live in a world with free will, and free will is the source of most human suffering. God could have made a world with no evil, no pain, no suffering, but that world would also have no love, no courage, no sacrifice, no meaning. Because love that is forced is not love. A world without the possibility of evil is also a world without the possibility of real goodness. God gave humanity freedom, and humanity, again and again, has used that freedom to hurt each other. The suffering in the world is not God's design. Much of it is ours. The third answer is the hardest and the most honest. Sometimes we don't get an answer. Job never got a full explanation. He got something better. He got God. He got presence. He got the sense that he was known and not alone. And sometimes that is the only answer available. Not why, but who. Not an explanation, but a companion in the dark. So does God care? Here is my answer. A God who watched suffering from a distance and did nothing, that God would not deserve worship. But a God who entered suffering, who felt it, who conquered it, that God is worth everything. The resurrection is not just proof that Jesus rose from the dead. It is proof that suffering does not have the final word, that death is not the end, that the worst thing that has ever happened can become a doorway to something greater. I'm not going to tell you your pain doesn't matter. It does. I'm not going to tell you it's all part of a plan and you just need to trust. Sometimes that answer's too small for the grief you're carrying. But I'm going to tell you this: you are not alone in it. The God of the universe knows what it feels like to suffer, and he has not abandoned you, even when it feels like he has. That's the God question. Every week we go deeper into the questions that actually matter. If this video made you think, if it helped even a little, subscribe and share it with someone who needs it. Because these questions deserve real answers. And we're just getting started. I'll see you in the next one.